Ain't like I'm still 5 years old, you know? Ain't like I'm gonna be sitting up every night asking my mom, when's daddy coming home, you know? Who needs him?
For decades, Will Smith was more than a star. He was Hollywood's smiling king, the hero who could do no wrong. But behind that perfect billion-dollar image lay a dark secret, a truth rooted in a single, terrifying childhood memory that would one day fuel his catastrophic fall.
The little boy that watched his father beat up his mother, that was a rage that had been bottled for a really long time.
He built an unbreakable empire on charisma and laughter, becoming the icon of blockbuster cinema. Yet, the smile was a mask, a shield forged in terror to hide a deep wound that refused to heal. The world saw his triumphs, but missed the flashing red warning signs of a man secretly fighting a lifelong battle against a ghost from his past. To understand the shocking truth of why he threw it all away in a single moment, it is essential to first explore how he built the flawless image he fought so desperately to protect: the prince's crown. His journey from the streets of West Philadelphia to global stardom was not just a rise to fame, it was a desperate attempt to build a fortress against a memory that haunted him. Willard Carroll Smith Jr. was born in Philadelphia on September 25, 1968, into what looked like a stable, middle-class home. But inside those walls, a storm was raging. That storm broke when Will was just 9 years old. He stood frozen, watching his father, the man he looked up to, unleash a brutal blow against his mother, so violent that she collapsed. That moment branded his soul. As he later confessed, he was paralyzed not just by fear, but by a soul-crushing shame for not doing anything to help. In that silence, a vow was born. He would become so funny, so successful, and so powerful that he could protect everyone he loved. He would build a wall of success so high that the pain of that night could never touch his family again. This secret vow became the engine for his entire life. His first attempt at building that wall was through music. As a charismatic teenager, he joined forces with DJ Jazzy Jeff, and together they became the Fresh Prince. Their brand of family-friendly, story-driven rap was a breath of fresh air, carrying laughter instead of anger. It was his first masterpiece of misdirection, using humor as a shield. The world fell in love with it. In 1989, they won the first ever Grammy Award for Best Rap Performance, a historic moment that should have been his crowning glory. But even then, a shadow fell. Some of rap's most respected artists boycotted the ceremony, furious their category wasn't being televised. So there he stood, holding history, yet feeling the sting of rejection from the community he came from. The win felt hollow, reinforcing a deep-seated fear that he wasn't enough. While the world saw a smiling prince, he was quietly building his defenses, using charm to keep the darkness at bay. Success brought money, but the discipline his father had brutally taught him hadn't yet taken root. At just 20 years old, fame went to his head. He spent recklessly on cars and jewelry, ignoring his responsibilities. Then, the walls came crashing down. The IRS came after him for millions in unpaid taxes, seizing his fortune and leaving him flat broke. The fall was as swift as the rise was dazzling. One minute, he was a Grammy winner. The next, he was a cautionary tale. It was a brutal humiliation, but it was also the lesson that forged him. Talent wasn't enough. He needed control. On the brink of total collapse, destiny intervened. Legendary producer Quincy Jones invited him to a party and, on the spot, demanded he audition for a sitcom role in the middle of the living room. With nothing to lose, Will unleashed the charisma he had been honing his entire life. The role was his. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air wasn't just a second chance, it was a resurrection. He had turned his greatest humiliation into his launching pad. But while the world laughed, the wound from his childhood festered in silence. Each laugh track was a layer of armor. Every charming smile to the camera was another brick in the fortress he was building around his heart. From television, he launched an assault on Hollywood, and the world had never seen anything like it. Bad Boys, Independence Day, Men in Black. He became the undisputed king of the summer blockbuster, the man who could save the world with a one-liner and a grin. To millions, he was the embodiment of charm and fearlessness. This massive success gave him the power he craved, but it also gave him more to lose, making the secret he carried even more dangerous. Each box office record was another desperate attempt to outrun the ghost of that little boy. frozen in his parents' bedroom. But the fortress he built couldn't protect him from himself. At the height of his Fresh Prince fame, he married actress Sherry Zampino, and with the birth of his son, Trey, he felt a redemption greater than any award. He finally had the family he swore to protect. But the spotlight is a jealous giant. The relentless demands of his soaring career, the long nights, the constant travel, pulled him away from the very home he was trying to build. The cracks began to show. By 1995, the marriage collapsed. For a man who defined himself by his vow to never repeat his parents' failures, divorce was the ultimate defeat. It was the first major crack in his perfect facade, a devastating sign that no amount of fame could stop history from repeating itself. The pain of this failure would push him to build his next fortress even higher, projecting an image of perfection so flawless, no one would ever see the fractures underneath. The King's Fracture. After the humiliating collapse of his first marriage, Will was determined to build a fortress so impenetrable that no failure could ever touch him again. In 1997, he married actress Jada Pinkett, a woman whose fierce energy and magnetic presence matched his own. Together, they weren't just a couple, they were a dynasty. With the birth of their children, Jaden in 1998 and Willow in 2000, the image was complete. They were Hollywood royalty, impossibly beautiful, endlessly talented, and seemingly unbreakable. To the world, they were the blueprint for success. But for Will, this was more than a family. It was salvation. It was the ultimate shield against the memory of that 9-year-old boy, the living, breathing proof that he had broken the cycle. He wasn't just a movie star anymore. He was the patriarch of a perfect family, the king of a flawless kingdom, and the master of his own destiny. But every kingdom has its secrets. For years, the Smith family brand ran like a well-oiled machine, projecting an image of radical honesty and enlightened partnership. They were more than a married couple. They were life partners, a team. But behind the curtain of that carefully curated image, the pressure was building. Whispers of an open marriage and unconventional boundaries swirled, but they were always dismissed as the price of fame. The truth, however, was far more complex and far more damaging. The fortress was beginning to crack from within. Then, in July 2020, the walls came crashing down in the most public way imaginable. The world watched live as Jada sat down at her now infamous red table with Will by her side. This wasn't a pre-taped, polished interview. This was raw, and it was about to get ugly. With the cameras rolling, Jada confessed to having what she famously called an entanglement with singer August Alsina during a period when she and Will were quietly separated. The word entanglement became an instant meme, but the look on Will Smith's face was no joke. The king of charisma, the man who always had a witty comeback, sat in stunned silence, his eyes filled with a profound and unmistakable pain. The smile that had sold billions in movie tickets was gone, replaced by the shattered expression of a man being publicly humiliated by the woman he had built his world around. In that moment, the mask didn't just slip, it was torn away for the entire world to see. This wasn't just about infidelity. For Will, this was the public broadcast of his greatest failure. The vow he made as a child, to protect his family, to keep it whole, had been broken, and the whole world was now a witness. But even that shocking confession was just a symptom of a much deeper, more devastating secret. The entanglement was the story that grabbed the headlines, but the real crisis, the truth they had hidden for years, was the shocking reveal that came later. Will and Jada hadn't just gone through a rough patch. They had been living completely separate lives since 2016. For 4 years before that red table talk, the image of the unified power couple was a performance. The marriage, for all intents and purposes, was over in private, even as they continued to play the part in public. They were business partners, co-parents, and life partners, but they were not husband and wife in any traditional sense. Imagine the immense, soul-crushing pressure of that lie. Every red carpet appearance, every family photo, every interview where they spoke of their unbreakable bond was a carefully constructed fiction. Will Smith, the man whose entire identity was built on control and perfection, was trapped in a situation he couldn't fix, forced to uphold a lie that gnawed at the very foundation of his life's vow. This wasn't a crack in the fortress. It was a structural rot that threatened to bring the whole thing down. The unresolved rage from his childhood, the terror of repeating his parents' mistakes, and the humiliation of his private reality created an emotional powder keg inside of him, and the fuse was getting shorter by the day. The unraveling was no longer happening in private. The internal crisis began to bleed out into the open. In 2021, he released his memoir, Will, a raw and stunningly honest confession of the childhood trauma that had shaped him. He laid it all bare, the night he saw his father attack his mother, the shame that followed, the vow that drove his ambition. It was a desperate attempt to control the narrative, to explain to the world the man behind the mask before the mask shattered completely. He followed this with a YouTube series, Best Shape of My Life, which was supposed to be about physical fitness. Instead, it became a terrifying document of a mental breakdown. The cameras captured a man wrestling with his own reflection, weeping openly and admitting to the world that at the height of his fame, he had even entertained fleeting dark thoughts. The invincible hero was showing his scars, proving he was just as fragile as anyone else. The world was finally seeing the fractures in the armor, but no one could possibly predict the violent explosion that was about to come. The shattered legacy. On the greatest night of his professional life, the ghost that had haunted Will Smith for over 40 years finally broke free, leading to a shocking act of violence that would destroy his legacy in 10 seconds. March 27, 2022, should have been his coronation. After a 3-decade climb filled with blockbusters that defined a generation and dramatic roles that stretched his soul, he was finally holding the Academy Award for Best Actor. The ovation that filled the Dolby Theater was like a tidal wave, the world's ultimate validation of his journey. The boy from West Philadelphia, who used jokes as armor, was now the undisputed king, crowned with Hollywood's most sacred honor. His lifetime of struggle, of chasing perfection, had crystallized into a single, golden moment of pure triumph. But the higher the crown, the sharper its edge. Just moments earlier, a joke from Chris Rock about Jada's shaved head cut through the celebratory air. For Will, it wasn't just a bad joke. It was a public jab at a woman who had been open about her struggles with alopecia. But more than that, it was another moment of public humiliation, another crack in the fortress he could not control. And in that instant, something inside him broke. The man who had sat silently through the entanglement confession, the man whose entire life was a performance of unshakable cool, rose from his seat. The confident stride, the controlled fury. It was a scene from one of his movies, but the stakes were terrifyingly real. In front of 1 billion people, he struck Chris Rock across the face. The sharp crack of the slap echoed through the stunned silence, a sound that would reverberate across the globe. The 9-year-old boy who once froze in terror as his mother was struck had finally snapped. This was not a defense. It was an eruption of misplaced protection, fueled by decades of repressed rage and the agony of a private life that was spinning out of control. The backlash was not a wave, it was a tsunami. The fall was immediate and brutal. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, the very body that had just crowned him, banned him from the Oscars for 10 years. It was a punishment of unprecedented scale for a star of his magnitude. His frantic, tearful acceptance speech minutes after the assault, where he bizarrely tried to frame his actions through the lens of his character, Richard Williams, only made things worse. It came across as a desperate, rambling justification, not an apology. In the days that followed, high-profile projects were quietly shelved. A Netflix thriller called Fast and Loose was put on ice. The planned sequel to Bright vanished. The king of Hollywood had become a pariah overnight. His name now synonymous not with blockbuster success, but with a shocking and indefensible loss of control. The fortress he had spent a lifetime building had been demolished by his own hand in a single impulsive act. But just when the world thought it understood the story, a story of a protective husband pushed too far. A final, devastating secret was revealed that reframed everything. In 2023, a year after the scandal, Jada Pinkett Smith dropped the ultimate bombshell in her own memoir. She and Will had been separated and living completely different lives since 2016. The world reeled. The image they had so carefully maintained, the image of a united front that Will seemed to be defending that night, was a lie. This buried truth exposed the slap for what it truly was. Not an act of noble defense, but the desperate, tragic lashing out of a man trying to protect the fiction of a marriage that had, in private, already ended 6 years earlier. He wasn't just defending Jada, he was defending the last remaining pillar of his shattered public image. The humiliation of the joke was layered on top of the deeper humiliation of living a lie, and the combination proved to be explosive. Now at 56, Will Smith is attempting a comeback from a self-inflicted exile, but the shadow of that night looms over everything. His 2022 film, Emancipation, a brutal and physically demanding role he hoped would prove his artistic merit, was released into the deafening silence of his scandal. The performance was powerful, but few were willing to listen. 2 years later, he returned to his comfort zone with Bad Boys, Ride or Die. The film was a massive commercial success, crossing $400 million worldwide and proving that his box office appeal hadn't entirely vanished. But it was a hollow victory. The world might still pay to see the Fresh Prince, but they no longer believed in the flawless hero. The mask is gone forever. In its place stands a deeply flawed man whose lifelong hidden trauma finally erupted on the world's biggest stage, leaving a shattered legacy and a haunting cautionary tale about the devastating cost of buried pain. In the end, the tragedy of Will Smith is not found in the echo of a single slap, but in the silent scream of a wound that never healed. For decades, he constructed a flawless king to hide a terrified child, using laughter and blockbuster success as the bricks and mortar for his fortress. But his story serves as a haunting reminder that no amount of success can silence the ghosts of the past. The very trauma that fueled his ambition became the poison that guaranteed his downfall, proving that a mask, no matter how perfect, will eventually shatter under the weight of the truth it's hiding. It leaves us with a haunting question. Was Will Smith a hero who finally broke, or was the hero simply a character he could no longer stand to play? If you believe there's more to this story than meets the eye, hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories you thought you knew. Let us know in the comments. After everything, what does the legacy of Will Smith mean to you?